Hi everyone, my name's Casey, and before we get started today, I want to give you a particular scenario. It's 2:30 in the afternoon, and you've been on an airplane for nearly 3 days back and forth. You are preparing to arrive in the United States, where you will live for the next 4 years while you earn your bachelor's degree. Up to this point, you've experienced multiple delayed flights and issues with your student visa. Thanks to all these problems, you missed your new student orientation. So now you're having a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear as to whether or not this decision you've made to come to NKU, even in the United States, is a good idea. Lucky for you, once you finally arrive at campus, there's an admissions counselor who greets you kindly and takes you into her office. While here, she explains to you everything that you missed during orientation, and you're able to feel caught up and put some of those anxieties to rest. This is a scenario that unfortunately many of our international students experience. Lucky for this student in particular, he was greeted by someone who had a high level of cultural awareness and someone who understood him and his culture enough to help him feel better about a scenario that could have honestly gone very poorly. In higher education, it is crucial for us to understand how to communicate across intercultural borders. In my current role, I'm an advisor, and as an advisor, I see a lot of international students, in particular international students who come from cultures different from my own. So it becomes important for me to not only understand how to communicate with these students so that they can succeed, but so NKU can succeed as a whole. Today I would like to teach you some go-to rules when it comes to communicating across cultural borders. We will discuss ideas taken from Hofstede's cultural dimensions about power distance, femininity, masculinity, and also what it means to be from a collectivist culture versus an individualist culture. I hope you will use this information and then apply it to your current place of employment so that you can have better relationships with your coworkers and make your corporation better in general. When I was a little girl, my mother instilled the idea early on that in order to gain respect, you have to give respect. So when I'm thinking about communicating with my international students, I want to make sure that I'm relaying the utmost amount of respect to them so that they in turn respect me. When thinking about how to do this, I know that I need to understand their culture. So to begin today, I would like to discuss the idea of what culture is. Depending on whom you ask or where you look, culture can have a lot of meanings. So for today, I want you to think of culture as something that connects a group of people. Whether that's a tradition, a religion, a geographic area, it's something that brings a group together. In Northern Kentucky alone, we have a lot of different culture that exists. And even thinking about Northern Kentucky compared to Cincinnati, these cultures are very different too, even though they're only 5 minutes apart. So cultures really do exist everywhere. So now that we've covered what culture is, let's talk about some of the history behind some of the cultural dimensions we'll study today. In the 1970s, a longitudinal study was conducted of hundreds of IBM employees across the globe. This study was conducted with the hopes that corporations could use its findings to learn how to communicate better across the globe and make sure that their corporations were then in turn more successful. Today we're going to explore some of the findings from this study, and I hope you will be able to use some of them to implement them into your current place of employment. The first cultural dimension I would like to explore is the idea of power distance. You can think of power distance like a hierarchy. For countries that have a high power distance, it is clear who is superior and who is not. You can think of it as like a pyramid scheme. Those with a lot of power are going to be on top, those with not so much are going to be towards the bottom, and you'll definitely be able to understand who these individuals are. In a high power distance culture, employees do not have the same kind of collaborative relationships with their superiors that employees in low power distance societies might. In the United States, we are considered low power distance. To make my point, I want you to think about the place that you work. Does your supervisor collaborate with you? Does your supervisor seek out your opinions or ideas? If so, then this is considered low power distance. At NKU, we have a lot of students who are from high power distance cultures like Japan or Korea. When I'm working with these students, it becomes important for me to think about how this high power distance culture might be affecting their perspective of me. In their culture, I'm likely considered an authority figure since I work in a teaching profession. It is my job to help them understand that our culture at NKU is different. I'm not an authority figure here to them. I am a partner in their success. And maybe this is a skill that you need to be able to implement in your place of employment as well. The next cultural dimension we'll explore is masculinity versus femininity. Let's discuss what it means to be a masculine culture first. In the United States, we have a more masculine culture. We have very defined gender expectations and roles that we expect men and women to follow. I want you to think about in your personal life, what are some of those gender roles that maybe affect you? I came up with some myself. So in the United States, men are expected to be emotionless while women are emotional. Men are assertive while women are passive, and maybe in their households, men are more commonly the breadwinners while women are considered caregivers. In a more feminine society, these gender roles would be more fluid. Maybe it's okay for a woman to be the main breadwinner while the man stays at home to tend to the household. The gender roles aren't as clearly defined, and they're not as different between men and women as they are in a more masculine society. It's important to recognize these differences for the same reason it's valuable to know power distance. For example, if I'm working with a male student from Brazil, and I can clearly see that this student is struggling in his classes, but he's not willing to tell me, it could be his cultural background that's causing him to act this way. Because in his society, if he has a very structured gender role for what masculine is, having a weakness, like not doing well in his classes, could be a problem. So he's not comfortable relaying this information to me. Again, I know this is from an advising perspective, but I still think this can be applicable in any place of employment. Finally, I want to discuss what an individualist culture is versus what a collectivist culture is. In a collectivist culture, the group opinion matters the most. Group harmony is highly valued and sought after, where in an individualist culture, just like the name suggests, the individual opinion matters the most. When I was in college, I met a very good friend whose name was Yuki. Yuki was from Japan, and I quickly learned that Yuki and I had very different family dynamics. For Yuki, he was very reserved when it came to his family. Yuki was a computer science major, and through our freshman year, I witnessed Yuki struggle a lot. This wasn't a major he was happy with. Yuki wanted to work on cars. He loved anything that had a lot of speed. Motorcycles, cars, anything that he could go quickly in. When I asked Yuki why he didn't choose something that made him more fulfilled, he told me he had to be a computer science major because this is what his family wanted for him. Yuki is a perfect example of a student who is from a collectivist background who is valuing the opinion of their family more than something that they actually value, or maybe they're valuing their family's opinion of a good major more than they value what they want to do as a major. I run into this pretty frequently as an advisor. So it's my job to help my student determine what are their strengths and what are their weaknesses, and how can we maybe choose a major that still makes their family happy and values that opinion, but also pulls out their strengths. This is a kind of a fine line to walk, and honestly, sometimes it can be really difficult. But being culturally aware and understanding where that student comes from can help me make this interaction more successful. So to summarize, we've learned about power distance, and how in high power distance society, social structures matter and they're very defined. We learned about masculinity versus femininity, and in a feminine culture, gender roles are very fluid, and they're not as structured as maybe they are in the United States. And finally, we looked at collectivist cultures versus individualist cultures, and how in a collectivist culture, the group opinion matters the most. So I hope you'll take this information today, and you will not only use it to give respect, but to gain respect in return. Thank you for watching.